Hello, beautiful people. This is Mr. Price again. We're going to go through a brief presentation here on solving one and two-step equations. And this is pretty basic. It's really 7th, 8th grade, and it's touched on again in Algebra 1. So let's just make sure we're all together on this before we jump into a lot of more complicated equations in Algebra 2. So notice these four things that are popping up on the side here. We want the variable by itself and positive, and that's very true, and we'll see that here in just a minute. No negatives. We got to have it positive, and typically the variable is x, and we want it by itself. We want x equals something. Okay, so I'm going to use a technique that has 5 letters. It sounds like elbow. That's why this elbow is showing here in the picture in the upper right-hand corner. So it's L, and I'm going to go through this kind of quickly here, LBOOS. And the way I remember it is Larry brought an ornery owl to school. And the L stands for draw a line between the left and right-hand sides. We're going to do that on every equation. We're going to separate the left and right-hand sides. Then we're going to box the variable. And we'll either box the variable, just the x, and sometimes we'll box the coefficient and the sign in front of it, depending on what type we have. The first O stands for opposite operation. Whatever we see is the operation on the side we're interested in, where the variable is. We're going to do the opposite of that operation to cancel out or get rid of typically a coefficient or a number. And the other O, the second O, stands for whatever you do to one side, you must, it's imperative, you do it to the other. The equation has to be balanced. And then the S just really just means solve the equation. Okay, so let's dive in. There's 2 types. We're going to start with one step. It doesn't get any easier than this. If the technique that you use and you're happy with and you're comfortable with results in you successfully solving equations, I'm happy for you to stay with that technique. But if you struggle with this, you might want to consider using this 5-letter technique. It works not only for simple linear equations like we're talking about here, but for more complicated equations, functions that we'll be studying in Algebra 2. That's why I am kind of introducing it here, is for the later work. There's 2 types of type 1 or one-step equation. There's a type 1 where you have the variable has a coefficient greater than 1, and then there's another type where you just have an extra number along with a coefficient of just 1 for the x. We'll go through both of those real quickly here. A couple of easy examples. You should already know the answer to this. It's quite simple. We know, you should know, x is 9. 9 times 4 is 36. First step, draw the line, separate left and right-hand side. Step 2, box the variable. We're boxing x. We want it isolated, want it by itself, don't want to mess with it, leave it alone. Let's get rid of the 4 so that we can actually solve for x. All right, so our next step is to do the opposite operation of what we see. Now, I don't see anything there. That's because there's an invisible multiplication dot there. We covered that in the invisibles presentation, if you remember. So that's 4 times x. There's no plus sign, minus sign, division sign. Okay, so it's 4 times x. I'm sure you guys know that. So to get rid of it, we do the opposite of multiplication, obviously division. We pick a 4 because it'll cancel it out. Whatever we do to one side, step 4 says we must do to the other. That's the second O. And we divide by 4 on that side. Do our cancellation on the left. That turns out to be a 1, of course. And then we'll bring down everything else and do the math on the right. And you know and I know that x is equal to 9. So we'll bring down the x, the equal sign, do our math, and we've completed this equation. Very, very simple. That's our final answer. Now, second type of one-step equation shown here. We're going to separate the left and right-hand sides. We have 2 terms on the left-hand side and 1 on the right. Step 2 is to box the variable. Box the variable because we're going to preserve that x for a minute. Let's hold it in reserve. Let's get rid of the 12. It's causing us a problem. It is being added. Step 3 says do the opposite operation, which is subtraction. And whatever you do to one side, step 4 says do to the other. So now we're all set up. And obviously 12 minus 12 is 0. And 36 minus 12 is 24. So we bring down x. We bring down what's in the box, which is the x. And then we bring down our equal sign. And we bring down our math answer, our calculation, if you will, from the right, and x is 24. Very straightforward, very simple. You guys should all know how to do this. Okay. Let's go with the two-step equation now. It just takes 2 steps to solve it, not a big deal. You use LBOS, L-B-O-O-S. You'll hear me refer to LBOS in class, and I will, that's what I'm referring to, and I will usually write it out on the board and work through it with you, regardless of what technique you ultimately use. So here's our two-step equation. We're going to separate the left and right-hand sides. You can see that x does not have a 1 in front of it now. It's got a -4. So we've got to have 2 steps, need 2 steps to get to solve this equation. We're going to box x and its coefficient and sign, x and everything connected with it. Still, our problem child right now is this plus 12, and we're going to get rid of that by doing the opposite operation of what we see, and that's subtracting 12, and there's our 0 for the left-hand side. However, we must put that minus 12 on the right to keep the equation balanced, and that's going to give us 24, as you already know, on the right-hand side. We're going to bring everything else down. So we've concluded step 1. Okay, you should automatically know, you should already know what the answer to this equation is, and we'll see in a minute if your thought is correct. So that's the answer from step 1. Let's repeat it for step 2 and finish this guy. We're going to follow the same steps. That's the beauty about this program. You don't have to learn anything new. Just LBOOS, LBOS. Larry brought an ornery owl to school. Separate left and right-hand sides. We're going to box the variable only this time because it is -4 times x. Remember that first slide said we want x by itself and positive? Well, that's what we want. So we don't want this -4 in front of this x. And that is being multiplied. That's -4 times x. There's an invisible dot there, multiplication dot. So let's go ahead and cancel out or get rid of that -4, which is being multiplied. And we're not going to divide it. We're going to divide it, but we're not going to divide it by a 4, because that would give us a -1 on the left-hand side, and x cannot be negative in our solution. It's got to be positive. So this box right here says, remember, we want x by itself and positive, so we divide by a -4. So let's do that. Here's our -4, division bar -4. Whatever we do to the left-hand side, we must do to the right-hand side, and we're going to divide by -4 over there. Negative divided by a negative, you know, or you should know, is a positive. So that's going to cancel itself out. It's going to give me a 1, and it goes in front of the x. But as you know, we've talked about it. You don't normally show it. You'll never see it there. It's invisible. And so there's our x. Here comes our equal sign, and here's our mathematics, our division on the right-hand side. -6 is our final answer. So that's LBOS and how to solve pretty simple linear equations. And we're going to go to literal equations in a minute, and then multi-step equations. Ciao for now.